Everyone and everything you know will die. I will shepherd you to safety, test you, suffer the same fate, by force if necessary. Here's your look at McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, Injustice 2, Dr. Fate. Powerful sorcerer Kent Nelson wears the helm of fate and sees the fate of all mankind, for better or worse. He knows the world will end either by Brainiac's hand or in a war between Batman and Superman. Though the helm compels Kent to preserve his grim fate for the sake of order, Kent's humanity compels him to intervene on behalf of his heroic friends and risk the unforeseeable consequences. Before we find out the fate of this review, hope it's really good at least, the first thing we'll do is do some size comparisons so we can move on over the Injustice 2 Dr. Fate that we're about to have a look at and compare it with, say, the Man of Steel's Superman. Even though this isn't Superman from Injustice 2, it's a regular sized DC Multiverse figure. Kind of give you at least an idea. It's about the same proportions. If anything, you could say that Dr. Fate's a little slimmer, a little leaner, and of course he does have a straighter looking cape as well. Not too much gets thrown in here with Dr. Fate. You do, however, get yourself a flight display stand, which we'll talk about more in a second, but he also comes included with, of course, a trading card. The trading card, once again, is using figure photography, depicting his costume from Injustice 2. I personally like the costume that he has in Injustice 2. I'm not as crazy about characters like the Flash, but I think at least Dr. Fate kept it pretty consistent to the way he looked in the comics. And even though I'm not as crazy when it comes to the figure photography being used for the trading card, at least they make use of a nice light source behind him, giving them that Dr. Fate logo. It's a nice looking trading card. Flip around to the back. The real name, Kent Nelson. Once again, a read-up down below. It so happens to be also, just in case you guys were paying attention, the same read-up that I used at the beginning of the review as well. Fancy that. We're going to put that to the side. He also comes, like I said, included with a display stand, a flight display stand. So if you've gotten so used to seeing on this channel these types of display stands, he's not actually going to come included with one. Though he does technically still have pegals on the undersides of his feet. So if you want to make use of those black stains, by all means you can. I prefer the fact that he does come included with the flight stand. So I'm glad to see that they threw that in there. For the flight stand, it actually consists of two parts. You get yourself a main bottom display base, which is clear, circular, and it does have a peg. So technically, if you want to, you can display Dr. Fate on the stand and not make use of the neck at all. The neck then adjusts, well, neck attaches, slots into the bottom here, and snaps into place. Some of the older stands I've looked at here on this channel for DC Multiverse figures, they've always seemed to be difficult to remove. And yet I've noticed lately, the flight stands with these figures seem to be a lot easier to remove. So again, you can either have them standing on the stand or definitely make use of the flight neck. This opens and closes, and then that easily just fits around his waist. Of course, it helps to move his cape out of the way a little bit, and then that just clips around his waist like this. And yeah, you can get a little bit more of an interesting pose. Let's just bend his leg a little bit. Straighten out his other leg. Bring out his arms. Hey, it almost looks like I know how to pose. Not quite, but at least it gives you an idea of what he looks like when you've got him in a levitating pose. And something I would definitely consider more so with a character like Dr. Fate, not something I would consider with, say, the likes of Batman. So I like the fact that they included that. Let's go ahead and take him off the display stand for the time being. It certainly would be helpful to be able to see the figure up close and personal. So let's just get this clamp off of his waist and put that to the side for the time being. He doesn't come with any other weapons or an accessory, even though technically he does have a gripping hand. So it sort of leads me to believe he should have included an actual accessory, while the other hand, as you can see, is closed shut. Looking at the head sculpt here, classic looking Dr. Fate. Slightly modernized when it came to the Injustice 2 design, but I don't think too much of Dr. Fate's classic look was ruined, unlike, say, the Flash, which Flash is one of my least favorite designs from Injustice 2. I actually think it worked pretty good for Dr. Fate. He got off pretty easy when it came to his design. So what you do get is your classic head sculpt, that helmet of Fate, of course, that he wears. The coloring of the gold is really nice. There is a little bit of additional black, and of course the eyeballs themselves are painted solid white. But the gold looks really sharp on this guy. It does limit a little bit when it comes to the articulation, which we won't get into just yet. But as you can see, I mean, that's, to the extent, that's pretty much what you're going to be getting here. That's it. As for the rest of his outfit, now the neat thing about his outfit, somewhat neat is the fact that the lower torso here is all soft rubbery plastic. Now, I would imagine they probably have done this so that they can utilize the body skeleton underneath for other figures. And that if that means we'll get more figures, this is why I say it's neat, because then they could probably get a lot more bang out of their buck of the existing molds. It's a lot cheaper to produce an overlaid plastic piece. It's going to go over top of the skeleton rather than having to produce an entire mold. The detailing on the costume is actually pretty good. If I was to really go and watch the game or play the game, I would have noticed that right in this area here, he has this lighter blue patches on both sides of his body, but I think also in the game, he's got a much darker blue on the inside of it. They've just left that off. Paint, though, other than that, is pretty good, actually, even on the skirting itself. Bringing in some nice additional browns, some blues, nice gold in there as well. Love the sculpting of the belt. The cape is notably a different color. Now, before you start saying, well, wait a minute, why would they have done the coloring of the cape so off like this? In the game, actually, he has a lighter cape like this. Though in the game, he does have some additional gold that's painted here, and it's painted down the sides of the cape. And as you can see, they just have left that off, just keeping to the molding of the cape itself, which is actually pretty soft plastic. There's a lot of soft things on this figure. Soft torso, soft cape, and of course, lower soft skirting. The skirts that he has on either side of his legs. I like the use of this dark blue that they've used. Again, they add in the game a lot of additional colors. So like normally the lighter blue strips on the sides of his costume wouldn't have been there, say, in the original comics. But of course, they do add that in there for the Injustice 2. It's a bit jarring, but I mean, based again on how he looks in the game, it's pretty accurate as well. Got some nice gold also done in his knees with the additional knee pads with the Fate logo there. And he also has himself the shin guards. The gold is really nice on this. And I know I've already said this already, and pardon me for just repeating the same thing, but when it really comes to the gold is super sharp. It's clean gold, too. There's no real additional wash on it. I don't think necessarily the figure necessarily needed extra washing on it, because it would have, I think, made the mask, as well as anything else that's gold on the figure, look really dirty. It's just the right amount. That single coat of gold is really all they need. And then still, there's features on there that can still stand out. In this case, I really feel like a figure with additional wash, like Fate here, I think would have ruined the look of the figure. And I like that they kept it really minimal on the paint. For the figure's articulation, let's just get his arms straightened down here. Let's certainly start with his head sculpt. I know we've already kind of talked about that already. I don't know if you can actually see it, but the helmet sits pretty close to his shoulders. Not too close, that's going to start scraping things. But you can still move the head all the way around. And then where the limitations come more so in is when you try to move the head back. For obvious reasons, he has the lower end, the back end of his helmet sticking pretty low down. Because of that, you really can't bring the head up. I kind of wish that you could, but understanding based on the design of the helmet, it would just be impossible to be able to give, unless they made the neck longer, where it was further up, where he'd be able to get a little bit more clearance. But then I would only be saying his neck looks too long. There's really no winning. The head does look down a little bit at least, and you can also rock it back and forth just a little bit. For the arms, now the arms do come out. The shoulder pads, luckily, are made of softer plastic, and they're further down on the arm, so you can get them brought up. Now, they're going to get hung up a lot of times on the cape. If you want to kind of get them beyond that point, it helps just to bring these up a little bit. And then that at least gives you that 90-degree angle bend that we like to see here. He does also have the socketed joints, which also aids to help the arm bring a little bit further forward, and also allows the arm to come out a little bit further back as well, like the little socket joints, when they're not overly out there, you know, when they're not sticking out too far. With these smaller figure bodies like these ones, like the Dr. Fate, for example, the sockets tend to be a little bit more smaller. When we get to like the animated figures, I think that's where we get too large of these socket joints. But on a character like Dr. Fate and this kind of body of these figures, I think it actually works well. It kind of just gives you a little bit extra work with. He does have a swivel in the bicep. The figure also has a double hinge on the elbow. And he does also have a swivel in the wrist, where you can rotate the wrists all the way around and hinging them back and forth. Now, when we get to this torso, I had already mentioned that there's a softer plastic working here. So if I put my finger against it, I can kind of feel where there's the ledge of plastic. This is all harder plastic, and this is kind of where it starts being a little bit softer. This does allow the figure to move forward and back. I don't know if this may start splitting over time, but at least it gives them some additional crunch. Technically, though, the ball joint actually works more down here, So there is probably an upper torso crunch here, and then there's a lower torso ball joint right here. It's actually just below the belt area. And that also allows the torso to move back and forth this way. The thing you will want to be careful, though, is as you're rotating the torso that way, it's going to come untucked from the belt. So you're going to have to kind of tuck it back in. Then for the legs split out. The skirt sort of goes along with it. The problem with the skirt, though, is you really have to be careful, and I've already started doing it myself. If you bring the legs too far out, see how it's starting to rip from the middle skirting area, and these things are attached, glued on both sides. So while he does have the means to split, if you were to go full Van Damme splits on Dr. Fate, that would rip the side skirting. So I would say only tread cautiously. Even then, that's pushing it. I've already started seeing there's a little rip line right there. So I wouldn't stretch the legs any further than that. You can, yeah, bring the legs forward is fine. You can also bring them back, which is okay. Just don't do Van Damme splits on Dr. Fate. Swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure also does have a double hinge on the knee. He has no articulation from the boot end of things, but certainly when it comes to his feet, you can move them back and forth this way. And he also has an ankle pivot with toe articulation as well. Nice design of Dr. Fate. Honestly, I would have liked to see comic Dr. Fate, and I'm sure it's something that McFarlane Toys may consider doing down the road. I don't think necessarily, let's just tuck his shirt in there, I don't think necessarily the Injustice 2 Dr. Fate is too far of a departure from the way he looks in the comics. So if you really just want a comic-looking Dr. Fate, I think he checks that box off well enough. The costume is a little bit of a departure from the way he looks in the comics, but again, I don't think it's too far of a departure, let's say, like the likes of Batman, the likes of Superman, or in the case of what we got already as a figure, the likes of Flash, which is unfortunately one of my least favorite of the DC Multiverse figures. I really like the look of Dr. Fate. The coloring is really nice on this guy. You got to be careful of some of the aspects on this guy, like shirts untucking, the skirting ripping if you're bringing the legs too far out. Other than that, though, I really like the way that Dr. Fate turned out here. By the way, if you're wondering why I didn't bring in the Injustice, Gorilla Grodd, or Flash for the comparisons, because that would have made some logical sense. After all, we are looking at Injustice to Dr. Fate. Couldn't find them. I don't know whereabouts I have put them, but the location of them remains currently unknown, and I had to move forward with, of course, the review of Dr. Fate. And I actually am really liking the look of Doctor here. There is some problems with his skirting, as you can kind of already see. It's split from the center of the skirting. Other than that, though, one little bit of caution, of course, when it comes to displaying the figure. You don't want to split the legs on this guy too far to the extreme. And yeah, even bringing his legs forward is not going to give you too many problems, but just be careful of the skirting. A lot of the figure is making use of the softer plastic. You see primarily most of it being used in the torso and the lower skirt, which makes for a figure that has a more seamless looking body. It limits a little bit of the articulation, admittingly, but it still gives you a nice looking Dr. Fate to be putting on display, especially for the fact that they include the flight stand. The character could have easily just used the black display stand if you want to just have him in a neutral pose. But I think when it comes to Dr. Fate here, I'd like to have him levitating. I think it just works a little bit better for the character. What do you guys think of Injustice 2's Dr. Fate? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content you're seeing, hit that subscribe button down below. Turn the bell notification on and keep your peepers peeled, because there will be more Injustice. Well, that's not true. I don't think there is any other Injustice 2 characters out right now by McFarlane Toys. But I can tell you, there's definitely going to be a lot more DC Multiverse reviews coming your way, so keep your peepers peeled to this channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.